Hello, and welcome to the Grand Cinema Hotel, a podcast hosted by two friends who love cinema. Tonight, you'll be staying in room 176, Paris, Texas, the famous indie classic from Wim Wenders. So go ahead, get comfortable, and throw on that do not disturb sign as we go on a journey of self-realization and suffering in Paris, Texas.
I knew these people. They were in love with each other.
Travis, hey, have you seen Jane or talked to her? We thought you were dead, boy.
He was kind of raggedy and wild, and she was very beautiful. And he loved her more than he ever felt possible. How long have I been gone, do you know?
4 years.
Is 4 years a long time?
It is for a little boy.
What's going on, all my amnesiacs, and thank you for checking back into the Grand Cinema Hotel. As always, if you're listening on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, comment. Really helps the channel out. As always, I'm joined by Alvaro.
What's up, guys?
And today we're talking about one of Alvaro's favorites here. We're talking about an old movie. I thought it'd be nice to kind of mix it up a bit. It's been a minute since we've done one of these. And it's always a good time because we usually try to find like an absolute banger to kind of bring to the people, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a movie that everybody's seen. But Alvaro, I'm going to let you take over for a little bit here. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what movie we're talking about and why it means so much to you. So
we're talking about Paris, Texas today. Just as you like to say, you clicked on the episode, so you're probably aware. But Paris, Texas, a film by a German director, Wim Wenders, came into my attention once he really started diving into films. I think I always kind of have a interest to see what was really popping at Cannes. And this movie is one of the ones that kind of gets brought up in a lot of technical, like a lot of people who work in the technicalities of film always bring this movie up. And I just kind of came finally across it and wanted to watch it. And I did. And I was just kind of blown away from the first time that I seen it. I think I really felt like I hadn't seen something with this type of material pulled off as good as this, but I do think I end up having a soft spot for these type of movies. But Paris, Texas really instantly, I guess after the first watch, did become one of my favorite films ever. And I think that has to do a lot with, there's a lot of components to the movie, but I think the three things that stick out to me a lot is the score, the color grading, and Harry Dean Stanton, because I think everything he's in I've really, really enjoyed, but this for me is his best role, which is saying a lot.
Yeah, I'm not the most familiar with him, to be honest. I know I've seen him here and there, but I feel like I had missed his prime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I never really got to see him where he would be considered like one of the better working actors, which is like, honestly, if you go back, he probably is, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm looking at some of the movies he's been in that I've seen, and it's not ones where he really sticks out to me. So it was kind of weird to me to even see him as a leading man, because like the movies I know him from, honestly, are like, I remember maybe the first time I heard of him was when I saw The Avengers in 2012, because it was the cameo, right? It was a big deal that he was in it. Other movies are like, he's an alien, of course, but Alien is an ensemble film, so it's not like... And it's really the Sigourney Weaver show, you know?
Right.
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, right? Twin Peaks, The Green Mile, Escape from New York, Christine, Inland Empire. I knew him from his work with David Lynch. Once I started getting into David Lynch, I was like, oh, that's a guy who's in all of his movies, right?
Yeah.
And also we have Dean Stockwell's in David Lynch movies as well, who we'll talk about a little later. But I had never got to see Harry Dean Stanton really shine until this movie. So it was really interesting to see that. It was like, oh, this guy's phenomenal. Like this is one of the best acting performances I've ever seen. So it's just kind of weird, you know. Like I do understand that this is a very small movie. This is like I said in the intro, like this is an indie classic. It's like, come on, it's a Janus film. I'm pretty sure there's a Criterion of this. When this movie came out, it made $2 million at the box office in the 80s. So that's the equivalent of nothing.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But I can definitely see how movie is like a fountain of inspiration, and how this is one of those movies where it's like your favorite's favorite, you know? Like I wouldn't be surprised to hear that many of the directors that we've talked about on this show before, this is one of their favorite movies, because it's so obvious to see just how much this movie has inspired other movies that are not as good but are kind of going for like a similar structure of how they tell a story. But I've never really seen a movie like this before, honestly. Not an American movie, at least, which is like, this isn't really an American movie. You know, it takes place in America and it's spoken in English, but it's a German co-production with, I forget which other country. But, you know, this is a foreign movie, so it's an outsider's perspective of America. And I think that is one of the reasons why I'd never really seen anything like that before.
Yeah, I think that's there's always a connection that I made, I think, even recently with the other movie that there's a few movies who make me feel the way this movie feels, but I think the only other one that comes to mind recently is like Red Rocket. And
I was going to say Sean Baker is a filmmaker where it's like, this guy definitely has watched this movie before.
You were influenced by this, you know what I mean? And I that's what I was thinking the whole time, is Sean Baker seems to it's interesting because I think Wim Wenders, some of the stuff that I've seen from him, or the reason that it kind of really works, is because this is kind of going into a bigger scope of a discussion, but there's this whole like how the outside world sees America, and kind of sometimes we have discussions where we talk about you can't hate something unless you love it. So I think he was enamored by the mythology that is America, and
who's not, right?
Yeah, and then I do feel though that sometimes us being from, you know, California, we can take some of that stuff for granted. And I think when an outsider does it, they have this, similar to the movie, this idea of what it should look like, this idea of what the emotions are conveyed. I really liked it, a lot of his movies, and I looked into his like themes that he always likes doing, is like always being on the road. And America to him is always like, it's all road, it's all street. So it's all options, it's all different trajectories of life, it's all different odysseys, right? And I think those things, to see it that way, you have to come from a place that isn't that way. And you know, Germany obviously has really, really drastic changes in their history.
In the time that Wim Wenders grew up in, this world did not know freedom.
Yeah. So like the vast desert and, you know, Texas and these big things, I feel like to somebody who grew up around that era, do become this endless possibility, and that's what America is.
Do you feel like he's enamored by America? Like, do you feel like not a love letter, but that this is like a tender portrait of America?
I think, yeah.
I see this as a very sad, sad characters that are in a beautiful movie.
Yes.
So I do think that he does see a lot of beauty in America and like its natural landscapes, and just, you know, people like to make fun of the middle states of America, right? The square, dusty, boring states, but it's like, they're gorgeous.
Yeah.
And they really are. Like, that is its own aesthetic, you know? Like,
exactly.
But it's still as enjoyable as Los Angeles or Miami or Chicago or whatever, you know? It's like, if you really dig into it, it's like, these are the places you really should go when you visit America, is like these middle of the country states, because like that is the majority of America.
That's America, yeah. And
like, you know, if you go to Wyoming, you'd be like, what the hell? Look at all these forests and woods and all these natural monuments that are there, you know? It's like, from an outsider's perspective, I mean, it's kind of a crazy place, right?
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, there's only certain places that look like that. Even, for example, if you were to take, you know, the Middle East, that it looks different. There's no you know, palm trees. It's a different type of desert. And then maybe, you know, a Mexican director could feel that same type of, but I think it's more literally no big cities, just desert. But then when you're in America, yeah, you could make a movie as he did here. You show what is always in movies, Los Angeles. And then I do still feel, though, in the way that he shot it is still very unique. And maybe it has to do with, like you said, the budget here or how he sees LA. But to juxtapose that with, you know, this vast emptiness of Texas, which we know is like now still in the year that we're talking about is nothing. And so imagine when they made this movie.
Honestly, this is just a joke, but it does feel like he sees America like it's the back of an In-N-Out t-shirt.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that color grading, those purple and red sunsets with like the neon and everything. You know what I mean? Like especially of the 80s.
It's like True
Not so much
Freedom
now, right? But and almost like this movie, the color grading. I know you said you like it a lot, but you know what it reminds me of? Like the whole thing was built around that famous painting of the people in the diner.
Oh, I see what you know
what I'm talking about?
The
Like
one,
it's like Hawk's Diner or
the one
something
that
like
they
that?
used for the Batman too. Like that's the diner shop.
Well, that's like similar to it, but that's not exactly the same. But I think you know what I'm talking about. It's a very famous American painting of those people sitting in the diner from like a outsider's perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what this whole movie kind of looks like. So I do think that at least in terms of the look of the movie, that there is a admiration for America. But then what it's saying about the people who are in the movie, I do think that it sees them as like these depressed people in this beautiful place.
Yeah,
right?
I agree, and I think that's where the best part of the movie, or I think why the movie ends up standing out, because anything could visually look interesting, and maybe at this time too. I don't know if necessarily movies that had this type of plot were this beautifully set with, like you're saying, this dream landscape, but we're talking about stuff that is very character driven and emotionally driven, which I think might be a lot to want to handle in the runtime here, which I think is 2 hours.
It's a long movie. It's almost 2.5 hours.
2.5, yeah. Which I
and
mean,
for what it's about, if you're not feeling this movie, it's gonna feel long.
especially he doesn't talk till like
Yeah, I mean,
25 minutes in.
Exactly. It's a silent movie in some points. It's kind of a Western. It's mostly a road movie. It's definitely a familial drama. One or two big laughs, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyways, I did want to say too that my favorite aspect of this movie, I know you said the color grading, but it's the cinematography, because how it is shot. And when you shoot these Western landscapes, you just can't help but think of somebody like John Ford,
Yeah.
Like this movie looks like The Searchers, and it's like, why? It's about this dude who's looking for his family, which I guess, this movie could be called The Searcher, and it would make sense, right? But boy, is it beautiful. Boy, is it shot well. Robbie Mueller is the cinematographer on this one. I would have to look to see how familiar I am with his work, because I'm sure if I went back and looked, I have seen something. But this movie was basically new for me in every aspect. I'd never seen a Wim Wenders movie. I'd never seen a movie where Harry Dean Stanton was the star. And I had never seen a movie. Well, I guess we'll see right now when I look it up. But for it to be so new to me was really refreshing as well, because it just felt like I kind of I checked one off my bingo board, or my bingo card, of like, okay, that is an important piece of cinema that I've seen. Whether I had really liked it or didn't like it was not really as important to me as it was to just view the movie, Like I went in very open. I didn't know if I was going to like this movie. I knew for sure that I was like, I'm not going to just be like, oh, this movie looks whack, right? I was just open to it because it's a movie I'd heard about for so long because of you, and just the internet in general. Like this movie really popped off a couple years ago on the website formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's popular in the film Twitter world, and it's obviously because of the aesthetic and things like that. So I was just always like, what is this movie? Like people talk about this movie so much, but no one ever talks about what it's about, really. So it was really easy for me to go in and just be like completely blind,
Yeah,
not blind, but just completely lost as to what is about to happen in these 2.5 hours. And I'm not gonna lie, in the first hour and a half, I was just like, I mean, it's okay. Like it's really beautiful movie, cool music, whatever. But then once it really gets into that third act is when it was like, oh man, this floored me, like this is very, very good. But, it's a long movie, it's a road movie, and it's not necessarily a feel good movie either. I'd argue that it's a very feel bad movie, but it's worth that runtime once you get to the end,
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes its time. It's time for you to be with the main character and try to process what it is that happened, and the fact that he's kind of like in the same way Memento, when you're as confused as the main character is. It kind of takes its time to establish yourself and kind of get to that baseline. And I mean, here, that is kind of what takes more than, I would say, for half of the movie is for him to finally, you understand a frame of what's happening or exactly what is that went here that has him acting, the main character, Travis, acting so desolate or acting so strange, which, again, talking about having patience to be able to get to the point. But I think it's really hard when you've seen the movie and to talk about what it is, because it's one of those movies that I think does spoil if you're trying to get into that third act, and you're never going to be able to explain it as well as it's shot. It's one of those movies, at least.
So since you said spoilers, because this is such an old movie, I don't have a problem with if you want to spoil it at all, but
Okay.
it's a little early to talk about that.
Right.
So let's just wait till the end. But
I
think
want
we should dive into the movie a bit, right? Like what it's about, really, our story here. So, it's this amnesiac, Travis, like you said, played by Harry Dean Stanton. He's been missing, wandering for 4 years. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows where, how, what. They know nothing. They think he's been dead, right? His brother finds him by luck, brings him back home to his son, and at that point, he decides he's going to try to find, the mother of his son, and I guess maybe piece together what could be left of this broken family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it really becomes a road movie. We're getting our journeys in from Los Angeles to Texas to find the mother, and it's not necessarily it's not necessarily I don't want to say a good or bad idea, but when I was watching this movie, I was just like, I don't think this is gonna happen for you, bro. Right?
Yeah, this can't pan out
So
well.
it's this odyssey of a father and son trying to find a mother that I don't know if she necessarily wants to be found. Eventually he reconnects, and we'll save the ending. But that is essentially the bare bones of this movie, which is kind of why I see now it's a hard movie to talk about. You really have to experience this movie more than you can. You can't dissect it unless you've experienced it, is how I feel. And I'm not just saying that as like oh, bro, if you haven't seen it, I can't even tell you. I'm not trying to gatekeep the movie or anything, but I feel like you can't really convey those themes and emotions unless you've seen it.
I mean, I think what's interesting about the story that you're saying is probably anybody listening to this, anybody who's seen it, anybody who's heard of it, probably knows somebody who's been in a relationship like this. So it's a very grounded story in terms of you've seen bad relationships, like the people try to make them work out. And so then if you're trying to describe the movie to somebody, it doesn't sound groundbreaking. It doesn't sound special. It doesn't sound like it'd be a movie that's worth giving it any more attention than that was a good watch. But then, like you said, when you experience it through the outside scope of, like I said, somebody who's not American, seeing, as they quote unquote, the Americana added to it, I think it ends up evoking these emotions that you end up sympathizing or even connecting with the characters. That I think is always what kind of elevates a movie like this.
It's just a hard one to really talk about if you haven't seen, because how can you just be like, oh, it's about this dad who's with his son trying to find a mom, and it's just really sad.
Kind of like After Sun.
Yeah, exactly.
I know both of us love that movie, and it's because maybe we're coming up in that age. There's a lot of relevance there, and I think a lot of the time that I've read this, there's a lot of people who they did watch this movie at the time it came out. That's really what resonated with them, and I think it's interesting because, again, this wasn't made by somebody who is American, and I think it's shot in a way where, like you said, John Ford, grand, but what it is really pulling from you seems like more of a grounded storyline.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought about somebody like Tarkovsky, where they see movies they see movies as poetry. And I feel like this movie is kind of similar to that, where it's a visual story more than it is a movie.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't very movie-like, except for the only thing that the only really movie thing about it is the outlandishness, right? Of oh, he went missing for 4 years and then he came back. Boom, that's your movie situation. But the actual inner workings of the movie and the relationships and the emotions and the unspoken things that are happening in this movie, because a lot of it is unspoken.
Yeah.
Not just because our character is a mute, but because it's like these people who are so like they're so guarded with how they feel about everything that like nothing ever really comes out that's the truth, and it all builds and builds and builds until the very end, and you get that big payoff and reveal where it's just this like exhale of everything that you've been holding in for the past 2.5 hours, which is really, you know, it's 2.5 hours to us, but we're talking about a lifetime to somebody, you know, like an important piece of their life, and to have held all that in for all these years and to finally get it out is very satisfying to see, you know. One thing I thought about this movie that there's this like Roger Ebert quote, and I'm not gonna like, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not even gonna bother trying to butcher it or whatever. I'm not gonna pull the Elon Musk, you know that one line in the movie and then completely get it wrong, right?
Like
but
me.
That the great thing about movies is that it can cause you to have empathy for characters and people that you would never have empathy for in real life, because it's a movie. There's this level of fabrication there where you know it's not real, so it allows you to as dumb as it sounds, you could be Taika Waititi and make a movie where Hitler's kind of like, oh, my cool imaginary friend, right? And it's a horrible fucking idea, but it can only work in some sense because of that movie box you put it in, right? And I kind of feel the same way about this movie as well. Like, once those reveals are there and you see what like has been withheld from you this whole time, you don't feel like this is a character that you would have had empathy for unless you had known that before, you know? You're like, oh my God, I was feeling bad for this guy. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's what makes it such a great movie as well. It's like, there's no good guy, bad guy. It's just the complicated mess that is people's lives. And that's what this movie really is at the end of the day, is just a story about the complexity of human life and emotions. And it's kind of hard to convey that to somebody who hasn't seen it. You know, it's not John Wick or Star Wars, for God's sakes. You're like, oh, there's space wizards fighting each other, or this assassin who killed 2,000 people. It's a small personal story, but I think that's why it makes it so good, is because, like you said, maybe not to these dramatic movie lengths have people been in these situations, but everybody has probably at one point or another felt like an outsider in their life. Maybe not to the point of amnesia where you forget who you are, but I definitely think that this movie conveys a deep human feeling that I would say everybody has had at some point. Yeah, whether it's because of a relationship or not.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, or not, doesn't have to be in a relationship with somebody that you're like your significant other. It could be a mother, it could be a father, it could be, you know.
If this movie was about a guy trying to find his mom for 4 years, it would work the same.
Yeah, because it's just like you understand the gravity of the intensity of that love, you know, and I think that is something that I think from the first watch I just took from this movie, which I don't know if a lot of movies make me feel, but it was the whole fact that, well, and connected to this, like I always like reading the negative parts of why people don't like any of the movies we really like. Because
they're losers.
Because yeah, like I guess I always just do want to keep open. There is going to be somebody who judges it for, not for just trying to be some dumb reasoning, but is trying like this movie's dumb. But there's somebody who just didn't like it because they said Travis was a gaslighter, and why should I feel bad for him? And like it makes so much sense. And then somebody just said at the end, like, isn't it what he does at the end show to you that he understands that he's like, you know, I don't want to, we'll get to it, but that there's a way to fix this, and the way to fix this isn't pretty.
Whatever happened to empathy?
Yeah, and you know, you find out more about like the two-sided thing that they talk about here, and that's always relevant in relationships. And there's literally scenes where they blend into each other, literally. And I think to see that in a movie that's, like you said, about characters that aren't supposed to be likable, was something that I think is one of the hardest approaches that you could possibly do and even in older audiences, because I do feel like people are so quick to judge based on what they take you as. And I think the whole movie is about perception. And, you know, there's the whole line about how their dad always introduced their mom from being from Paris, and they would always wait and then make the joke Texas. And they would go, oh, I thought you meant Paris, France. And then after a while, it just started like, he thought she was from Paris, you know. And I think the whole movie kind of devolves into that, like, you thinking of what a healthy relationship should be, and I should be doing this, and this is how you should be treated, and I'm so happy with you because of X, Y, and Z. But then that's not the reality, and you know that as an older, in this case, as an older guy who's been around for a long time, and knowing what somebody a significant age difference than you would want, and to, like you said, the first half of the movie or whatever, to just be set tone, and for you to kind of be like, what's going on here, or why? I guess somebody like you that has a kid, it is always a distant thing to me to be able to be like, so you abandoned your kid?
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's
Yeah,
like, what is that bad that you had to like, all right, I'm done being a father, or I'm done being a parent. So it's this drastic thing, but you kind of, even with this brother, and you kind of understand that there's something that went wrong here. And then you kind of just end up finding out that a lot of the things that are going on here are more just direct imagery of what he's going through his head. So it's like he's walking to Paris, Texas, for 4 years. Like, supposedly that's where he thinks he was conceived. His whole persona, who he is as a person, he believes is in Paris, Texas. And so that's why, he wanted to build his life around that area. And what that entails on its own, it's in the middle of nowhere. There is no, conformity to regular rules. And I think that's something that at the end, when he doesn't understand anything anymore, feels like comfort to him.
There's an important scene in this movie that revolves around the Paris, Texas joke or pun or whatever you would call it. And I do think now, after I've seen the movie from beginning to end, it took, in the beginning, you're just like, Paris, Texas, what the fuck? Like, who cares, right? Like, is it just a place? It's okay, sure. They had to call it something, right? But then you realize how important it is thematically to the movie, and the idea of, like you said, of Paris, France, Texas, you know what I mean? Like, that this whole movie is about the illusion versus the reality, from the director all the way down to
exactly
the way it looks. You know what I mean? Just every aspect of this movie is kind of based on like illusion versus reality of what you think life is going to be, or how fancy you think somebody is, and then the reality of it, right? And how that has formed this whole man's life. And like I said, he's not the villain of this movie, but he was the villain of his relationship, right? And you don't know that until almost the very end of the movie, right?
And you have the character
you're
admitting
not ready
to it.
to hate the Anne, the mother of the son, right? It's not like you like, oh man, this fucking bitch, like, why did she leave them and abandon their kid, whatever. Like, you do genuinely like, well, what happened? Like, obviously there's her side of the story too, right? But everything about this movie, I just noticed, is like, yeah, illusion, reality, and then even down to like thinking you're going to have a happy ending. Like, I don't know if that's not really a spoiler, but just everything about this movie is really tied to that, and is symbolized by that, the name of that city.
Yeah, it's like you said, like when you say Paris, you think the city of love, right? This romanticism, like, oh, I was with my love, I met her in Paris. But then you say Paris, Texas, and you're always going to compare these two places because they have the same name.
Paris, Texas, like dust.
Like
nothing,
you're always
nothing.
going to get compared to Paris, France, but you're literally the opposite. And
it's like Hollywood, Florida.
And then it's like that was his relationship that he was in love with. It's this image that he keeps saying his dad became obsessed with too, to the point where, oh, my mom became so shy, she gets so embarrassed. But she had a different reaction to it because, circumstances are different. And like you said, the whole movie is just an delusion. And so to see it, like you said, to be able to resonate with it so much, you wouldn't, if somebody told you about it, you wouldn't think it'd be something that it feels special to you. But like, I feel different whenever I watch the movie, because I'm just like, I don't emotionally. There's directors who like things don't make sense, or they're not saying much, but they're like, it's saying a lot. And it's similar to what they say when you look at a picture that's art, right? There's a lot of, everybody can look at it differently, and I think emotionally everybody can feel different strings out of this movie when you watch it.
Yeah, for sure. This movie is kind of like a a mirror to you, you know? Like, I think what you take out of this movie says a lot about you. And not every movie's like that, obviously. Some movies are extremely straightforward, and there's no room for any kind of discussion. The director told you exactly what they thought and felt, you know? But I do think that this toes that line between like what the director thinks and then like the fantasy around that, you know, because I think because he is an outsider to America, he can't really honestly speak on what it is like. So then this is just that idea, and then how audiences take it, especially like an American audience as well. It's like that's going to be its own thing, because it's like, whoa, this resonated in a way you couldn't have even understood, or like maybe you did think that it would, but not to this extent, right? Like, there's a reason this movie connects with people so much, and I do think it's because it is kind of like visual poetry, you know? It's just something that is like so from the soul, right? That you can't help but feel like this was written for you, you know? Or like this is written about somebody. Somebody could be like, this movie is literally about me, you know? And like I said, it doesn't have to have those dramatic movie elements of going missing for 4 years or whatever, but this is like one where it's like, damn, he beamed in on me, like perfect lock target, bro. And he called me out in this movie, or I've been in this situation. It's like he made a movie about my life, you know? And I do think that that's a special thing that not every movie can do. And like, I do think that this movie is honestly a very important movie because of that, because it's like if there was a bank of movies out there for like, oh, this emotion is this movie, like I think Paris, Texas is a movie that would be in that bank. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it is important to understanding the human mind. You know what I mean?
I just think it's like it's the whole movie's a dream. You know, it's a dreamscape, and that's why it looks like that. Like you said, those harsh differences in colors and the neon-esque is obviously a lot to do with the era, but
the Joe Camel backgrounds.
But that's not what it looks like. You know, I mean, obviously, like I said, we're from here, so you know some sunsets do look amazing, but
not every day, bro.
Over dramatized like that, and especially now we're talking about like lights not being fluorescent like that anymore, and like that whole image is gone, and
modernity has ruined this version of America.
Yeah,
there is no this America left in Paris. The one that's in Paris, Texas, is not there. You might get it, like you said, in Sean Baker's work, right? But this is a place that doesn't exist anymore. That's another reason why it feels so dreamy.
Yeah,
it's a time period. So like this is a period in America that we don't have anymore. I'm sure we'll probably do somewhere in Iowa, whatever. There's some small towns that just never advanced really. You know what I mean? I'm not to call anybody out who lives there, but I'm just saying, insert random state. Every state probably has a place that's kind of like this still, and I bet you it does feel like surreal when you're there. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I
if you
went
go to like Central California. You know, somewhere where no one really goes. It's like transitionary. You just go through that place. Nobody stops in that place. There's a lot of Paris, Texas is going on, you know?
Yeah, I was just going to say is over the weekend I went to Paris, California, which is spelled a little different, but they have a general store.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And they don't, it was 25 minutes till the closest regular store, you know, like a Walmart shopping center. And this, where I was going to go visit was just, Paris is only 32 minutes from here. So it's not like it was this crazy drive. And then all of a sudden I find myself the last 15 minutes driving to what feels like, you know, GTA's back alleys. It'd be like, but
I was living in Trevor's area of GTA.
So they're like, let's go get something from the liquor store, the one liquor store everybody goes to. And like you said,
and they stop selling alcohol at 9 p.m., right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And like everybody's selling there is no restaurant, it's just people selling out of their houses. So like you said, there's a reality in it, yes, but I think that as America, we've moved as a whole past that so much more that now, you know, as we get older, we romanticize looks of stuff maybe we weren't even around for. So this visually looks like nothing I've seen.
You know, we're 90s kids, so a lot of the imagery in this movie, we were there at the tail end of it.
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
But like, there is nothing, you can't romanticize eating a hamburger in front of a diner nowadays. There ain't nothing beautiful about that. That shit is either brick or gray.
Yeah, and I mean,
and the tables are white and plastic, you know, like just nothing. It's just like sapped of all of its joy in life or whatever. Like that idea is so gone. You know what I mean? Like, what? I miss Taco Bell when it was neon. You know what I mean? Or just bullshit like that. Like that. It's just this place that doesn't exist anymore.
I think it's even as simple as like right now we have it playing on in the background, and there's like these scenes where it's just like a junkyard, right? And it kind of goes even down to the aesthetic of cars. You know, you have an old truck here, it's yellow, and just like cars even now, their colors are a lot more muted. They all kind
Gray,
of
black, silver,
bend
white.
into each other. You know what I mean? Like
Navy
most
blue.
cars, yeah. And there was so many different types of looks of these metal cars before, and everything was just more colorful. And I think again, as him being an outsider looking in as a German, he sees this whole land with no rules. And it's all these crazy colors, and you know, it's similar in a way to what you would think Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, how that was shot obviously later. Like Vegas looks like that, but not like that, you know. But it's the same way here. Like California looks like that, but not every day. And it's again just the reason I know me and you love the medium so much is because you can live in these ecosystems that don't actually exist. And whenever a movie can drag you and put you in there, or it has you really thinking about like later in life where you're like, this feels like Paris, Texas, or whatever.
Movies can make you feel nostalgic for a place that you've A, never been, and B, doesn't even exist. Take me back to Pandora.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Take me to Tatooine.
Yeah.
Take me to Paris, Texas.
I need the green and red lighting.
I think it's important to talk about, to transition out of just like general and talk about the characters and talk about the family dynamic here, because that's like the driving force of this movie, obviously. And we would honestly be fools if we didn't cover that in this podcast, because that's really what the movie is about. So like we said, Harry Dean Stanton, Dean Stockwell, right? These are, I guess, well, Harry Dean Stanton is obviously the star. That's not even a question. But I would say Dean Stockwell is probably number 2 in this movie, because our character Anne, she only has 2 very vital sequences in this movie at the end. But I wouldn't say that she is even a co-star. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, I mean, that's where I guess where the movie is really impactful, or it is, you know, every scene or character here is integral, because she doesn't have much screen time.
But it's the most important screen time.
Because, you know, I do think at one point in this movie, and you've kind of said this as being a parent now, that you start to think in the eyes of the parent.
When I watch these movies, yeah, I see movies from a different perspective now, for sure.
And all of a sudden, like, when you do put that hat on, you like, but what about the kid?
Yeah.
You know, be like, in all of this, but what about the kid? And the kid in this movie is written very smart. He's very aware of what's going on. Even his, you know, the parents that he's had, which are
Classic traumatized kid. He's like way too smart for his own good already at 8 years old or whatever he is.
Yeah, like Walt and Anne have made him aware that, you know, you're not our kid, but we love you, and this is your father's coming back. And there's that whole awkwardness, like you said, to be able to, a kid of that age to be able to already understand, or think he understands at least, that his father is not the person who he calls dad, but then also trying to actually really explain to him what the nastiness of life is, right? And we had a joke right before we started the podcast of like the 8-year-old thinking the Bermuda Triangle was the worst thing they could see, and then finding out, you know, what reality, like the greed and corruption of the world,
and poverty.
And yeah, so it's that literally in the movie, but in the aspect of like, you also start to feel for Anne's character here, because you're effectively removing, Anne, you're effectively removing a kid from her.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. That's kind of confusing, too. It's like Anne and Jane. It's like they're really not that far apart. Yeah, so, like, let's talk about that a bit. Is, like, so we don't really know much about this. It's all given to us in pieces, but when you've seen it, you can put the whole thing together. So Travis goes missing because of this, what do you want to call it, existential dread of being a man? You know what I mean? Being in a family, and what that all entails. And it's a lot. I don't know if anybody knows that, but it's a lot, right? So some people, they fucking break. You know what I mean? And this is a man who definitely was pushed past his limits. And, you don't really know why, so it's like, okay, I can empathize with that, right, that this guy felt like he had to leave, but also you're just kind of like, I need to know like what's going on, right? And that's why it's like, so that's why you really hang around for this movie, because honestly, if that ending wasn't done so well, you'd be like, this movie fucking sucked. Like the ending saves this movie from not just being like, that was pure vibes, like nothing happened, blah blah blah, like all the things you could say about this are totally negated because of that ending and how satisfying it is, right? But this relationship between Jane and Travis, they seem like this happy, perfect couple. You see this home video of their perfect little life that they had, and like we said, it's the illusion versus the reality, right? That is the Paris, Texas of the movie, right? Is this beautiful home video sequence that just conveys so much emotion on that Harry Dean Stanton does, all without saying anything, right? And like that's such a beautiful moment. That was the first moment in the movie where I was like, wow, this guy's really cooking. Like, I understood that the movie was a little slow, but it's beautiful. Okay, it's kind of, there's literally dialogue in this movie of Dean Stockwell telling Harry Dean Stanton, like, I'm your brother, Travis. Tell me what's happening. Like, even the script itself is begging the character to tell, like, let me in, And this home video sequence is the first real moment that you have a chance to see what has like transpired in this world,
You're Mr. Incredible in color, and then that scene happens, and it goes black and white.
Later on in the movie. Anywho. But yeah, I felt like this is the first like really integral moment of the film. So I think it's this, and then the two sequences with Jane that really tied this movie together.
Yeah, because I do think
without that, this is some like, what is this art house bullshit that's not telling me anything? Like, I had to figure it all out by myself. I don't know what this movie's trying to say.
I think that's where even
it does reveal its hand by the end.
Yeah, where even the importance of the scene, the first scene you're talking about when you're seeing the home video, is even reflected through Hunter, because he's so hesitant, to want to call him dad, to want to recognize him as a dad. He doesn't even really want to be around him. He doesn't want to talk to him.
Embarrassed by him in the beginning.
And after he sees the home video, and he sees himself, the reaction that his dad has to this idea of, he's been sitting watching this home video a bunch of times, and it even shows like he's not interested in watching it anymore. It's just as much an illusion to him than it is to
this 8-year-old
Travis.
Has already gotten past this.
This was 4 years ago. Like this didn't exist. This is another lifetime. I have other parents, but then for him to even be able to see how his dad can't really seem to take even watching the home video, because it's again this illusion brought to you again, your thoughts of what was supposed to be a family
life that he had.
Yeah, and it's recorded, and it's like when we always talk about imagery being this, you look at it and you think so much of it, you don't know the reality behind it. And I think that was the first moment, and like you said, in the movie, where you understand what the whole point of all of this is, or why he's so turned off by the idea of even wanting to remember the past. And you're like, it's not that he doesn't remember. Oh, is he, up until this point in the movie, you're like, is he on drugs? Like what, why can't he remember? And then, it's like, no, he's repressing it. That's what it is. There's all this stuff that, like you said, in any,
it's like a war veteran.
Yeah,
who doesn't want to talk about what they did in Korea.
Because in any light, like you said, in this movie, it's just like they're not happy for their decision to leave the kid either. So that is something that, like, it's a trauma that they live with, and he has to constantly remind himself that he's not a good person, and that's why maybe he, these home videos to him, that life is like, that's not me. That's not the life that I have. That's a really great point, that this movie does. By the end of the day, you're like, oh, he's a really fucking bad person. Again, the fake was the happiness. Like, that was never real. This is real. That was the illusion, and that's why it's so painful, because that is when he was living the lie. That's when everything was actually fake. And that's what makes this like movie so. I think this is a movie about self-realization, and also I wanted to say this earlier. I think one of the reasons I find this movie to be very not American is because of that in itself. The idea of this like self-punishment and this like I don't even want to say like Eastern or whatever, or like
It almost feels like Buddhist. You know what
I
I
was
mean?
gonna say, like,
this,
yeah.
I'm going to release myself from all these like physical attachments to the world and like pay for the pain and suffering I've caused, and like the self-realization like nothing matters. You know what I mean? Just like I'm gonna wander the desert like some fucking character from the Bible. You know what I mean?
That is true.
Like,
I
it's
will
like
say,
almost more like mythical. You know what I mean? Like I'm no longer bound by worldly possessions. You know?
yeah, and
And that's so anti-American. Like to its core, that is the antithesis of what it means to be an American.
I mean,
I love stuff.
he didn't eat, man.
The fuck is that?
Yeah,
You
like,
know what I mean?
what do you mean you're not hungry, huh?
Yeah,
Even if
yeah,
you're not
exactly.
hungry, you eat because we have food.
Because it's America.
Yeah, because you have an abundance.
Go to McDonald's, brother.
Yeah, but I again, I do think that
Like
is
this exile journey, you know?
it does have to do with the fact that he's not American, and he obviously did his studying. He is enamored by it, so I don't think that it's like, and he thought it was like this. It's just that if this is what we talk about as weebs. If I write my story about Japan, it's gonna be this intense version of Japan that probably more than likely doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, but that doesn't mean it would be like offensive or bad. It's just that's a dream. That's dream Japan.
I even think the way that this film comments on even the type of film it is, because it's like, it's almost a Western, right?
Yeah.
But then that's kind of a common trope in Westerns, is like at the end of the day, Clint Eastwood or John Wayne or whatever, like wandering back off into the desert, right? But then so many Westerns were inspired by Eastern movies. So like samurai movies or warrior movies or like things like that, where it's like that would be where they got that from even, you know? So then it's like, it's just this constant mishmashing of everything, you know, like of movies themselves, of what is considered American versus not American. Like, do Americans even have original ideas? Like, are their ideas just tied to things from other places? So like, so is this even American at the end of the day? You know, it's like there's just so much going on, and it's like for a very simple story, it is deeply complex. You know what I mean?
I think it's weird and interesting just because it's in a way similar to the premises of Asteroid City, where like the setting of it doesn't get much more California, much more American, but the overall themes and what they talk about, even an alien could relate to. You know, like all of these things are integral, I think, to what it is, what we think is alive, emotion, and those things that are superhuman. And like you said, setting wise, even wardrobe wise, super American, but
Yeah, closer from the general store.
universal though. The themes, and that's why I think you could have somebody like Anne's character, someone that is from France, and Harry Dean Travis spends some time in Mexico. There's times where he's here, like singing in Spanish, and all of those things kind of just serve as again like the universal connection to everything that's kind of going on, I think. And it's just slight little subtle tones that kind of address that. And like you said, everything is an illusion. The director is German, or this even Claire Denis helped him do this. That's what it was. So I think you're talking about two
one of the most
countries.
American movies ever was made by German and French people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like talking about these American themes, which are actually like, are they even American themes, or are these just worldly themes? Like these are just themes of people. It doesn't matter where you live.
Yeah, I just think like you're talking about the pride of being American is where the glamorization of these certain things come from. The cowboy, right? The cowboy's American, and I think that is the enamorment that probably someone like Wim Wenders has with like what is the premise of the cowboy. Like you said, they walk out and up to the next adventure, but the cowboys never really seem happy. The cowboy never really has a home. Similar here, his character's like a cowboy, like he's
a wanderer, he's a searcher.
But you find out here the background of the cowboy, like why the cowboy can't be happy, why the cowboy has to keep wandering, and for everybody else, he
like
could be
watching Unforgiven and never hearing it. Like it's like watching Unforgiven, but they didn't tell you until the end. They're like, oh yeah, he also used to fucking blow people's heads off.
Yeah, because like you said, it'd be like, and then the stuff that ends up being described that happened, relationship with them, be like, damn.
So I think we should we can't really keep just talking about the movie like without, it's just going to end up being technical stuff, because we should just get to the the actual meat and potatoes of the movie, right? Of like why people watch this movie, why this movie works so well, and what it's really all about. So, you know, he's with his brother and his son reconnecting, right? But they want to fix that family, bro. Like that, you know, he wants the dream to come true. I'm going to get my people back.
The illusion.
Right? Yeah, we're going to go to Paris, Texas. We're going to live there and we're going to be happy. And we're going to be the perfect little American family again, right? But we all know, come on, that ain't going to happen. So they decide to road trip it to Texas. They want to find the mother. You know, they've been able to track her down because she goes to the same bank in Houston on the 5th day of the month to deposit money into an account she made for their son, Hunter. Sometimes it's $5, sometimes it's $50, sometimes it's barely anything, right? But it's all for his future. So we do at least get some kind of inkling that this woman still cares for her child. And like you said earlier, it's like you do realize that these two people never wanted to abandon this child. It's just the circumstances that were put in. And like I said, that's what movies do. No, you would never really feel bad for two people who abandoned their child, but when you have that movie box around it, it changes you and it changes how you see people, and it's because you know they're not real, which is kind of sad because it's like, why can't we have this empathy for people who actually exist, right? But that's just, game is game. You got to just charge it to the game. That's how it is. You know, Sammy Fableman's mom fucking sucks in real life, but in the movie, you're like, kind of know what she's talking about. You know what I mean?
It's similar. You know what I mean?
But that's part of the fantasy. The fantasy is that you pretend to leave your family behind, not that you actually do. It suck that shit up, man. Should have worn a condom, you know? Anyways. Yeah, you weren't thinking about how bad it sucked to have a family when you were hitting it raw, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, this feels so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to pay for that.
Yeah, what's the price? 18 years of pain.
Yeah, exactly.
But, are we going to get this happy family back? That's really what the last hour of this movie is about. He tracks her down. They follow her. They stake her out to the most primitive thing I've ever seen. I don't even know what to call it, right? So we've located Jane. She works at it's implied it's sex stuff, but it's not ever really shown. It's what would you call this? I called it earlier, a virtual, or no, not a virtual, but a primitive cam girl experience, or a primitive movie experience where you would go into a booth and there's I don't know. Is this it's so weird to me because I have no frame of reference for it. But now that I'm thinking about it, because you said he's German, and I'm like, the Netherlands is not that far away. Is this supposed to be some red light district type shit? It's she looks like she's in prison.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I know I'm kind of people are what is he talking about, right? But
I mean,
I was confused when I saw it. I was like, what the fuck is this? I've never seen this before in any movie. I've seen many characters go to a brothel or a whorehouse. I never seen whatever you call this.
Yeah, I would call it, I guess, maybe what they refer to, a speakeasy, I guess, or a peep show. So it's you're just seeing things you want to see, but this was before, I guess, people had some more shame and they didn't want it to be complete nudity. It was
not Twitch bathtub streams.
Yeah, but it was very heavily implied, at a time where stuff wasn't as readily. I don't think really the sexualization boom had happened here yet, so having accessible porn was probably really hard still. So I think it's even just the illusion of what the nurse is, what the teacher is, or all of these things.
And this is one of the iconic shots of the movie is these mirror images, and then you're like, oh, here we go, look with the holding up the mirror, right? Literally, this character has to look at himself to even admit what he's done. Is he admitting it to her, or is he admitting it to himself when he's telling her these things through the window, because he can see himself and she can't see him. But yeah, I was just what the fuck is this place, right? So it's like you said, some kind of bar, speakeasy, illegal situation, obviously, but they also have women there. But it's not necessarily a strip club either, because like you said, it's not that sexualized, because it's obviously not straight up prostitution, because there's a literal box and glass separating them, right? So it isn't a back room at a strip club or whatever. It is something more emotional, I do believe, than it is sexual in nature. I don't know, is this where lonely, was this even before the idea of a phone sex line or whatever?
That's what it sounds like to me. And I do think though
he's going there for an emotional experience that could also become sexual, but it is I would need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
It's like prostitute therapy or something.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like a different time where I think you had to have some more shame of like, you can't just be like, I'm just horny.
I mean, people probably also, like you said, because they had more shame then, they were probably not as like comfortable with even expressing those desires that they had.
I want the girlfriend experience.
Yeah, they probably did want the girlfriend experience. He wasn't just like, show me your titties, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just a different way of looking at what you thought you were supposed to achieve at a certain age as a man. And it's to want a woman want you a certain way. So it was at least act to me like you're interested in me. And I think it's but I would say that the interesting part about what makes me think what it is when he first finds out and he leaves Hunter in the car and he walks in, he heads up to like the upstairs room, and then the guy who's like the bouncer tells him like, you're up here too early, everybody's still downstairs. So it makes it sound like later at night everybody does come up.
That's where the prostitute.
And then that's where he starts to. I think that's where he gets the idea and starts questioning her of like, that's what they all say at these places, but how much do you actually get on the side? How many guys are you beating up with? Which I think ends up being the sad part, like you said, because sometimes she sends 500, sometimes she sends 5. It's all obviously based off of, well, she's a sex worker, so I'm sure it has based off of,
right?
Yeah, like sometimes maybe she doesn't want, like she gets depressed thinking about Travis and the kid. She doesn't want to see anybody. But other times she has to work. So, you know, for you to bring this up to her in that aggressive way reminds her of like, why am I doing this?
You know, we're watching this and like it's the whole movie sequence right now. I kind of wonder if this was a heavy inspiration for the Fabelmans, because it's not like a beat for beat comparison, but just the overall tone of it, it does feel a little Fabelmansy, you know?
Now that you brought it up, yeah, I mean, I think the comparison that you made between how Jane feels and compared to Spielberg's mom and the Fabelmans, it's the same sentiment of I'm your mom, but I'm, especially her because she's so young, right? Is I lost myself in this because I kind of got, like you said, that's a whole other discussion, but I kind of got trapped here. And obviously in this movie, it's a little different because he is older and you kind of could see with the toxic
age gap,
yeah,
1 star.
quote unquote toxic. And then the Fabelmans, they're just falling out of love, or they fell out of love.
Classic 50s story. He married the one girl he knows, huh?
Yeah, and the one girl that didn't
they're
like
actually
him.
not in love.
Yeah.
But they still have an
They don't
entire family, mortgage, and life together, right?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, but they don't even like each other.
So that is the difference, but I get what you're saying because the home videos bring
Or
out
just even the illusion of your life before, and then once the reality is shattered. That's kind of what I mean. And like that dream aspect of that perfect little American family, and then boom, mom's fucking your uncle. Huh.
And I mean, I think even
oops, mom's a prostitute, right?
Yeah. Even like I said, like the kid watching the film and seeing how happy he was before he could remember with his dad prompts him to be more open to like, look at this illusion in this world we lived in, this happiness, and I'm open to it. And I think that ends up working in the favor. You get a really good scene, I think, in this movie. One of my favorite is when he's walking him home from school, but they're not. They're walking on opposite sides of the street. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as a kid, everything is a game to you. So I think the fact that you're able to put that in a movie and me as identify how much that could mean to a kid at that age, like, you're playing this game with me. I've missed you so much. Like, you're my dad. And now you're being my dad. And because he ends up saying, you're like, I don't know, I'm just lucky, I guess. He has 2 dads, you know? Because it's like at that point, he feels like I'm loved by both of these men, and it's nothing but luck to him. And I think he starts to, throughout the whole movie, I think one of my favorite lines is he always says that he knew his dad wasn't dead because he could feel him. Mm-hmm. And he's like, and I could feel mom too, don't you? And I think that's kind of like, yeah, he does. And that's why there's that longing. That's why he walked for it, because it's there still, but it's an illusion. It's not real, but I can't shake it off. I can't stop wanting to pursue it, but it's not real. And I think, you know, he, like you said, he's like gave himself a punishment and was like, and you will walk the earth for 500 years.
You will salt the earth beneath you, right? Nothing will grow. So it's time to talk about what is real about this movie, because I would like to wind down soon. Mom's a prostitute or whatever.
Whatever you want to call it.
A therapist prostitute or whatever, right? Dad is a fucking loser. And the kid is,
Star Wars,
kind of well adjusted for the situation at hand.
Star Wars aficionado.
Right? Yeah, NASA aficionado. He was like,
smart kid.
landing was real. But okay, so Travis goes and he reconnects, although she doesn't know that it's him in the beginning. And he just, yeah, like you said, he's asking her these very personal questions. It does kind of come off more jaded than it does like I want to empathize with you, right? It's kind of like, oh, what the fuck? This is what you've been doing.
He was mad,
right?
yeah, like.
But, you know, you're kind of like, you're the one who ditched her for 4 years and left her alone with the kid. What do you want her to do when her options are not really varied? You know what I mean? And then we have our second meeting. And this is like the most important part of the movie. This is everything. This is what you've been waiting for, is the reveal. What is Jane and Travis's story? What is the actual story that I'm being led to believe here? You know, like,
what is so drastic?
What the hell is it? What the hell was all this, right? And you get this wonderful sequence. It's so well acted. It's so well shot. It's so well. Everything about it is just perfect movie making. Pure cinema kino, you know what I mean?
Precise.
Like, if the movie was just this, you'd be like, wow, that was the greatest short monologue I've ever seen, you know? And it's the retelling of their lives, and it's quite sad. You know, it's really fucking sad. And it's all too common, you know? This 30-year-old man and his 17-year-old girlfriend, which was the fashion at the time, right? About how, you know, typical story. Young girl falls in love with older man because he has things that boys her age don't have and can't offer her. He's attracted to her because she's probably a young virgin and he's going to defile her. And, you know, like typical shit since the beginning of time, honestly.
It's fashion
right?
at the time.
Yeah. Up until like, what, 2 years ago? Right?
Yeah.
Oh, man. So you're kind of like, okay, obviously I could tell this was fucked, kind of, because why the fuck is he so old compared to her? And like, we're talking a 30-year-old man in the 80s, so he looks about 60 years old, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Harry Dean Stanton
Has always looked like that.
He's dead now, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
he is.
But he looked dead in this movie already.
Yeah, and
no
he
offense
looked
to a dead man,
he looked like that in the Marvel when he was in the Marvel movie.
Yeah,
He's
like,
looked the same for like 40 years.
Exactly. So you're like, okay, obviously that was kind of weird, but like, you know, we are of the age where we probably have a family member who like, yeah, my uncle's wife is 10 years younger than him. Don't ask.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, be like, how did they make those babies?
It's reality.
R-wording. That's how they made those babies.
Exactly.
Lots of abuse and R-wording is how that family was made. That perfect happy family. Yeah, no. Made in the ugliest way possible, really. So that's like our first reveal, right? And they were happy enough for a while in this illusion. He would work, and he would miss her so much he would quit his job, and then the money would run out, and he would go back to work. But he missed her so much he couldn't work, which is kind of like, damn, Simpius Maximus, right?
Seriously.
I miss her so much I'd rather go broke.
I simply couldn't be without you.
I simply can't protect her and take care of her because I can't work.
She's too hot.
This movie wouldn't even exist if working from home had existed at the time.
What a
This movie would not be relevant.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, simply work from home? She could hold your hand while you're typing?
Simply get a better career.
Yeah, my brother, get a job. But the harsh realities of just being a man and a provider has obviously destroyed this man's soul.
Yeah.
Right? Like many, many others.
Yeah, exactly.
That's no surprise there, right?
No.
But yeah, those people who are giving it 1-star reviews, 2-star reviews, they're not wrong when they're like, this fool's a gaslighting, abusing harasser who trapped this young girl and stole her life from her. Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Like, that is what happened. And you do feel lied to, you know, but you could still, because it's a movie, you know, you got that empathy for every character involved. You're like, damn, none of you were right. All of you were wrong. You know, it's kind of hard to say Jane is in the wrrong here, though. I will say that.
I guess.
How do you blame this 17-year-old girl, right?
For being,
you should know better.
It's always like you said. It's always
Classic
like
excuse.
it's the you as the adult are supposed to know better. You would know that somebody of that age would be enamored by, you know, he says it in the movie.
Of course a 30-year-old man can attract a 17-year-old girl.
I lived a wild lifestyle.
Yeah.
And like everything about it is what enamored her. Even a simple trip to the grocery store wasn't a simple trip to the grocery store. It was an adventure. And of course, as a 17-year-old, we've talked about this all the time. All the girls on social media, like, I'm at the grocery store at Target. It's not just a regular trip at Target. It's documentable with every girl. It's the funnest trip to Target with my friends. Oh, we're so crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's the same thing here, but obviously a long, long time ago. And you can't hold her to any guilt, because I do think, like you said, there's things that she doesn't know, or these things are all moving so fast, and the gravity and weight of actually having a child with somebody that is so different than you at moments. And I think what you kind of said here that kind of is the realness of it, and also you're disgusted by it at the same point, is that when he's describing it, all of this obsession with her is coming out of love. You know, it's not that I'm going to abuse her. It's coming out of, I'm so obsessed with you that if I'm not with you, I start to distrust, and I start to get all these emotions, and I start to drink, and and that is the reality for a lot of guys. And that's why I think that girls stick around, because no, he does love me. And that's the part that
he loved me so much, he smacked the shit out of
like
me.
us, we don't, because we've never been a part of that. I don't love people that way.
Yeah.
So I don't understand it.
I show my love with backhands.
But when you get the movie, like you said, you get the backstory. You get the, like, no, but they were really happy. So I understand why she thinks, or he thinks, that no, let's go back to what it was. But then you find out that what the relationship has changed into is the reality, what you said, of what is actually the dynamic between you two. And what's sad about that is that is not a growing environment for Hunter. And I think that is the biggest thing that I think more for him, Travis, ends up being his realization.
Yeah, that he is the bad guy of their lives, and he does not need to be involved in their lives.
I'm the baddie?
Yeah. Me bad? But because of the journey and everything he's been through, it's like, I don't know if I feel like he properly atoned for what he caused them, you know? Because, like, it was funny when I explained the movie to my wife, I explained it to her from beginning to end. I explained the whole thing because she was very open to, like, just tell me, right? And then she's like, and that's supposed to be okay, that after all of that, he's just like, okay, bye. Like, sorry, I'm going through a lot. I just can't handle this. So you have fun raising this kid alone now that I brought you again. Like, you know, like, it's just like, wow. Like, for her, it was almost like, of course, this was a movie made by a man, right? Like, it was so hard for me when I hit you and when I drank, and you don't know the pain it caused me. Okay, I'm going to leave now for my own self-care. Bye. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but it's a movie. So, like, yeah, you can believe that. But the reality of this is like, wow, this is disgusting.
I think there is a little bit more, I guess, explaining in terms of that aspect of it. What I would say is the where she said, like, missing him so much she'd rather not imagine them, and so she stopped imagining him altogether. So it never seemed that Hunter was the issue here, but it was more the fact that Hunter was a reflection of the illusion, right? And so
yeah, if you have a kid with somebody you don't like, be like, tough shit, because now you're looking at half of that person for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and so I think that the issue addressed here is that obviously, as a loving mother, she wants to be there with her child, but this whole, like, yeah, like what he did to her, how he left them, shook her to the core, where I don't think she really thought she would be suited to be the mother. But I do think that the conversation they have is closure. I do think that Travis understanding that he's the issue here is something that, like you said, that's not very American. That's not very, like, to be able to come to the conclusion that you're like, I think any loving mother would want to be with their child. And I think that's what it runs here with, is that, of course, she didn't leave the kid because she didn't want to be with him, but she left the kid because of all this weight or whatever. And then I do think that the discussion they end up having, and it shows that, you know, through the mirror sequence when they're literally like
As
in
close
each
to
other's
face to
faces,
face as they could be.
and like you're seeing her body, his face, you know, like they're the same person. And I think there's that closure there that the movie does, because she knows when she goes to the room and they're like, I won't be there. And that's why she goes, because he won't be there. And I think that he understands that, and that's why the movie ends the way that it does. And yeah, like you said, in context, is it does it sound good? Like, oh, and now
It
she's
could never
upset.
sound good.
But it's in the situation of this movie.
It was the right thing.
It was the right thing because that's what worked for them. What was impeding the kid from having his true mom, that which they loved each other, was this like weird dynamicism of like, I can only get this through the illusion of the family. But once that's broken and you understood that like I was at wrong here and I fucked up, I think there's some closure there. Whether I think in real life that wouldn't be enough. You're right. In any situation.
No. In a real life situation, you're like, fuck that guy. Like, so you put me through all of that, and then you're also like, and I'm leaving again.
Yeah.
For my own self-care because it's better for me. Like, well, you're a parent, so you should no longer be thinking about what's better for you, right?
Yeah.
But also, in the reality of this movie, it is. Well, see, it's tough for me because I'm like, yeah, I understand that he'll never get to be with the mom again and have a perfect family, but shouldn't that be exclusive from his child? Like, should he not still have a relationship with his child even if he's not going to be with the mom? Because there's also like, did he fuck up the son's life even worse by taking him out of the stable family he did have, even though it wasn't his parent? Like, even though they're not his real not his real parents, they were giving him a better life than the mom is going to give him for sure.
Yeah, true.
So like the life that he's going to have with the mom, who's to say it's even better? Just because she loves him doesn't mean she could provide for him the way that the aunt and the uncle could.
That's true, but I guess it would have to go back to the scene where he's in his bed listening.
Yeah.
And like you could tell that he's a smart kid. He's come to the realization these aren't my parents, and there's that whole hole of like, just because these people treat me good doesn't mean they're my parents.
He's down with the struggle. He's like, I'd rather go struggle with my mom than be with this family. It's not my.
He tells
family,
him like,
right?
I'm gonna go get your mom, and he's like, I'm gonna come with you. Hey, well, what if we never see them again? It's like, what if? Like he's down with the idea. So that's what I mean. Like you would think, be like that. He would like, this is and it is a better situation because they got a house in LA, dog. They got it set. He going to cool.
Basically hurts everybody he comes across, you know. So it's like his brother and his wife, his kid, his baby mama wife situation, you know.
No,
he leaves behind a lot of damage in the places he goes. So yeah, maybe it does make sense for him to want to escape into the desert because that's where like the self-exile of where he really belongs.
Yeah, I guess like you said, like it's the punishment and.
It's hard to say that though when you're punishing yourself, right?
When
punishing yourself starts to punish other people, like, are you really? Who's really hurting here? You know, it's like everybody.
Yeah, that's the poetic ending there. You know what I mean? Like where, and he was set to get pecked at by a crow for millions and millions of years.
Yeah, like that. That was his Prometheus ending, walking through the forest or walking through the desert forever.
Like like you said, and I think again that ended to go be like whatever you take from that and watching the movie ends up being like, you know, and I walked away from the problem or I turned the page or whatever. But I guess I end up feeling like if you were for some reason watching this and you were like the toxic dad, I don't think you'd walk away feeling like I should do that. I think you'd walk away feeling like a self-reflection of like the realistic thing is to be like, I'm the issue. And how would you fix that? And it wouldn't be you can't just walk away for 4 years.
Yeah, no. That'll never be okay.
So
Wim Wenders doesn't understand the American woman would never comprehend that.
You'd be like, excuse me?
Yeah. He's like, I'm not going to pay any child support either, by the way.
I'm going to Mexico.
It's good for me.
And
I got to go start my family with Maria in Mexico.
And
I'll treat them right.
And
you
don't
guys
go
were
looking
the
for
test drive. My next family, my half Mexican kids, he's like, those fools are going to be treated real nice.
So happy.
They're going to be so happy. Yeah.
So yeah, but like, I do get the aspect of, you know, seeing it in 2023 goggles. Especially being like, and how is that better? Like, I don't know. There's
this movie has no better. It's feel bad.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a beautiful, nasty movie. You know what I mean? Where you're like, wow, that a simple story about the deeply complex human emotions. You know?
What is the meme?
Man-made horrors beyond my comprehension.
Yeah,
exactly. Basically,
it's basically
the
like
existential dread of man.
It's similar to, you know, the background of Midsummer, where you're like, it looks this way, but it doesn't make sense that I feel this way. And it's the same way here. Like, what is the most existential dread horror thing you could do for a human is, how about you fall in love and it wasn't real? Like,
Yeah. What is real?
Yeah, exactly. And that's again universal. It's not just American. It's the setting happens to be American, but I think that's why the movie resonates with. It still resonates. So now, I mean, we're sitting here talking about it, almost 50 years later.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, 40 years
yeah.
later. I don't have too much more to say, honestly, because this movie is still very fresh in my mind, and this is not just a one-time deal. I don't believe that I have said everything that there is to say about this movie. I don't even think I've scratched the surface, honestly. But I definitely wanted to do this episode after the first watch because I wanted to do something old. I know how much you love this movie. I know how popular this movie is nowadays. I do think that this is a very important piece of cinema. It's a very essential film. I can say that after now that I've seen it. Oh, let me tell you, it's very essential, right? No, but seriously, that this is one of those movies where you're like, wow, my cinematic knowledge has grown by watching this. Like this is a film school movie where you're like, you can learn so much about what a movie could be by watching this, and that's why I think it's important, whether you resonate with the character or you don't. I do think for the most part, you will.
Yeah, I mean,
even if you never abandoned a kid, everybody's done something very shitty that's haunted them for the rest of their life.
It's like you said, you watch certain movies before old go watch the masters, and I do feel when I watched this movie, I was like, I didn't know a movie could be made like that, with that direction. I didn't know a movie you could do that with a movie, and I felt the same way when I watched Robert Altman. It's like, or when I watched There Will Be Blood. Oh, you can make a movie, like you can make the best movie out of just people having their character change and go through tribulations and all, and there's same way with Jim Jarmusch. Like,
dude, most of the best movies are about humans' lives and the changes and the things that happen to them. It isn't about fucking wars or stupid sci-fi scenarios about androids or whatever. Like, nah. This is what they mean of like, this is cinema. This is cinema. Human emotion, the conveyance and the visualization of human emotion.
It's like you said, Tarkovsky. Like it's poetry. It's the story, the emotions are going through what is depicted and what you would take from these, and what happens when two sad people meet each other. What happens when a father and a son are meeting each other for the first time under these circumstances. Pursuit of happiness, stuff like that all comes from what you're talking about. Like those relationships that you have that are even deeper than any concept that you talk about. Like, what if we were in space with whatever? There's this world inside of us that is just as intricate. And I think movies like this dive into that.
Nice. So I think that's a good place to end it. I really like that ending you just gave us. The movie's on Max, right? So check it out.
The artist formerly known as HBO.
The artist formerly known as HBO. Yeah, exactly. I definitely think this is worthy of checking out, especially if you want to dive a little deeper into cinema, because this isn't exactly the most accessible movie in the world, right? Like, this ain't the one that you're really going to rush out to be watching, but you should. This is very, very good. I do think it is probably one of the better movies, right? Like, it's always tough to say after the first watch, but it's like, this isn't just my opinion. They're like, people are not lying. Like, yeah, this is one of the best movies.
No, I mean, we always talked about, especially with Titan being the first episode, like, Cannes is always up, or like, I tend to like that type of stuff more. And for this to win, even at the time that it won, I think speaks volumes to why it's still being talked about. I think those movies always kind of end up holding a weight of how much influence they have to the art. And I think, again, look what you're saying. This movie is integral to the art of cinema. And for anybody who's a student of it to understand and be like, I don't or do like Wim Wenders.
Yeah, I mean, this is a textbook. There's so much film knowledge here and so much you can learn. So I even feel like I learned a lot about just movies and what you can do with them from watching this. And I learned that every time I watch a great film that, makes me feel refreshed. It makes me feel... Even though it's a sad movie, not a bad movie. Even though it's a sad movie, like, wow, that made me feel great about life and like the fact that like, man, these pieces of art exist and I get to witness them, you know?
Yeah, and then I think because we live in the now era, but like that I can pop this up on Max, you know, within, you know, somebody will argue about the aspect ratio or whatever, but it's the fact that it's accessible to me at a viewing quality that's fine. And I think, you know, the fact that you can do that, like you said, you got to go out and seek some of these masters because you never know what'll inspire you or what you'll end up being like, oh, I like this. You don't know.
For sure, for sure. So like, subscribe, comment, tell us what you think. If you've seen the movie, hopefully we have convinced you enough to watch this because it's definitely worth it. So as always, I'm Gus and I'm with Alvaro. Thank you so much for another episode. Bye-bye.
See you guys later.